the United States of America, a land once marveled for its diverse and seemingly better government. With the statement of freedom and justice for all, America was admonished for its successful Constitution in the protection of the rights of the people, being of the people, and for the people. Let's wind back the clocks about 254 years ago, or about 274 years ago. 274 years ago, the Pilgrims and the Puritans came to this land entitled the New World, and the Puritans and Pilgrims colonized that territory for the British. During this time, the settlers were predominantly religious, if you might add. They incorporated church into the daily life and moral piety within their foreground. Movements such as the Great Awakenings that brought many revivals to the colonies sparked the birth of many denominations. Those such as Anglican, Episcopalian, Puritans, Quakers, Methodists, Baptists, and even Seventh-day Adventism in the mid-1700s. These Great Awakenings seem to spark the ideas in terms such as present truth, meaning the forgotten truths of the Bible that still needed to be applied to our lives today, such as the seventh-day Sabbath worship, and other topics regarding the improvement of doctrines derived from the Protestant Reformation started by Martin Luther's 95 Theses. These actions of persecutions are what pushed the early settlers into this new land. Persecution was being enacted by the Roman Catholic Church, and these settlers sought freedom, religious freedom, and were degraded as heretics by the papacy for it. The land in which they settled was considered a Protestant center because the majority of the settlers were Protestant, and that has helped develop the country into what it is today. A fundamental trait of the United States is religious freedom and the separation of church and state. Another is republicanism, which is a system of government in which power is held by the voters and is exercised by elected representatives responsible for promoting the common welfare. These two traits are the two traits that made democracy even possible in the United States, so unique among all other nations and governments before its time. It has no king, but has become a democratic system. And with the Revolutionary War, the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and the Constitution was made in 1787, 1789, the Bill of Rights were added. All these events moved forward into the biblical events today. Am I saying that the Bible foresaw that all these things would come to pass, such as the making of the Constitution or the signing of the Declaration of Independence? No, by no means. But I'm just trying to refer to their collection to making the country to what it is today. Human knowledge began to increase with inventions such as the textile mill, the steam engine, electricity, cars, television sets, cell phones, batteries, and the internet. As Daniel prophesied in Daniel chapter 12 and verse 4, as knowledge would increase in the latter end. And as a matter of fact, the United States is very active in the last days, for we are told of another beast or another kingdom that arises in Revelation chapter 13, verses 11 through 17. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from the heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword, and did live. And he had his power to give to life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast, that they should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Some of you may think, what are you getting at, Aaron? Are you saying that this beast is the United States of America? Without a doubt. Yes, I do believe that this beast, as stated by the Bible, is the United States of America. But here is proof. Notice how all the other beasts before this rose out of water, whereas this beast rose out of land. Water is represented in the Bible. Water is representative of peoples, multitudes, nations, and kindreds, whereas a beast rising up out of the earth is just the opposite, which is rising out of no nations, no multitudes, or peoples, a barren place. Have you ever been to the Midwest of the United States? States like Minnesota, North or South Dakota, Nebraska? Anyone can tell you that it's mostly flat and seemingly barren looking. And that is exactly what this prophecy is showing. The United States came seemingly out of nothing. Many other nations in the history books have remarked that such a country seemed to have come up out of nothing. For all the other nations of the earth, most of them have a longer history than the United States. Even though the natives were here, the Native Americans were a group of tribes scattered throughout North America based off of no real government, but had social order by kinship or clans. They were separated. Did you notice in the passage that this beast has horns like a lamb, but doesn't have any crowns on it? It means it has no kings, but it still has a horn, which we know means it has power. Notice that these horns are like a lamb. The Bible shows us in John chapter 1 and verse 29 that the Lamb is Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God. Because the beast has horns like a lamb, it means it exhibits characteristics just like Christ. Using the statement freedom and justice for all, which is derived from Paul's writings in Galatians chapter 5, which speaks of the free woman and the bondwoman, Paul in short exclaims that we are of the free woman because we belong to Christ, and that justice belongs to everyone. Because the United States bases its stance of democracy on biblical standpoints, does it mean the Bible is wrong or false because of how godless and how corrupt a nation we have become? Most certainly not. The United States is fulfilling the prophecy of its darkening and its downfall. Look in history. The United States had the 10 Commandments in the Supreme Court, but if you go there today, they are missing. Under any trial, it would be customary to make a vow to tell the truth by swearing on a Bible. Church was the regularity of the average American. So what happened to our country? What happened to that God-fearing nation, that nation under God, that nation for a cause, for liberty and justice for all? What happened? What? Are you going to tell me the times have changed? You're too right. For when one nation under God becomes one nation apart from God, you must expect the consequences. With moral decline on the rise since 2001, and many natural and heinous disasters and crimes to fall within our borders, we can plainly see our nation is getting ready to speak as a dragon, as foretold in Bible prophecy. Events and conspiracy theories such as the Illuminati, the 9/11 attack, the ultimate illusion of entertainment, and the earthquakes and natural disasters that are going on, HAARP, and other common faculties that are rumored to go on. I have no doubt that they exist. For the Bible says that these things would come to pass. Matthew chapter 4, verses 3 through 8. And as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, When shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? And Jesus answered and said to them, Take heed that no man deceives you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, and pestilences, and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Oh, how familiar these words portray our world today, with the political and economic crisis wreaking havoc around the world, the danger of the United States going to war with Iran, all the tensions and revolts in the Middle East, Libya, Egypt, who knows what other nation may have another civil war in the Middle East, and all the disasters and the random earthquakes, Hurricane Sandy, Irene, the October snowstorm in New England, the earthquakes in Canada, Pakistan, Hawaii, and if anyone remembers, the earthquake and nuclear disaster in Japan. All these natural disasters are foretold by Scripture and are expected to increase. Many heinous crimes are being reported more quickly, such as the Trayvon Martin incident and other controversial, popular topics. And this is only the beginning of sorrows, Jesus tells us. Many worse things shall be upon us, for the writings of a Luciferian woman by the name of Alice A. Bailey have been put into effect by our government and many political powers around the world. But when you read it, it is so similar to the new normal. Alice A. Bailey has written the blueprint, quote unquote, for the new age. Satan and his demonic hosts used her to describe the plan of the NWO, or the New World Order. And that's exactly what she did. Alice Bailey said, when you're changing a nation, do not bother with the older generation. They are too stuck in the old traditions. They will not change. But go for the children. And that is what has been happening in our world. She says, go for the children, especially 10 years and below. Since 1945, for an example, any person below 60 years can be a victim of the ideas and deceptions of this prophetess of the New Age. But of the 10-point charter, there are 4 pillars in which the New Age movement stands: reincarnation, meditation, evolution, and astrology. You could gasp. It's shocking. All of the things that seem to be custom now were not even imagined 30 years ago. The lawlessness in children and young adults, children raising children, men abandoning their families. Certain forms of sexual immorality are considered acceptable. Homosexuality, men with men and women with women. Bestiality, men and women marrying or lying with their pets or their animals. What a world we have become. The fathers before us, before our time, would have turned in their graves if they could. Alice A. Bailey has a 10-point charter, or the 10 Commandments of Rebellion. And that, I believe, was ordered by Satan himself. For we are told in Isaiah chapter 14, verses 12 through 17 of Lucifer's pride, how he sought to be like God. And for everything God does, Satan creates an opposite and a counterfeit. Halloween, for an example, was the same day Martin Luther posted the 95 Theses that started the Protestant Reformation against the evil papacy of Rome. But these 10 statements are written as follows. Take prayer and God out of public schools. Change the curriculum to ensure that children are freed from the bondage of Christian culture. Why? Because children go to school to be equipped to face life. They are willing to trust and they are willing to value what is being given to them. If you take God out of education, they will unconsciously form a resolve that God is not necessary to face life. They will focus on these things. The school counts them worthy to be passed on, and they will look at God as an additional if one can afford the additional. Number 2. Break the traditional Judeo-Christian family concept. Break communication between parents and children so that parents can't pass on spiritual values to their children. Do this by pushing excessive child rights. Number 3, remove restrictions on sex. Sex is the biggest joy, and Christianity robs people of this. People must be free to enjoy it without restrictions. It's not just for the married, it's for everybody. Number 4, since sex is the greatest expression of man's enjoyment in life, man must be free to express sex in all its forms. Homosexuality, orgies, even bestiality are desirable so long as no one is being abused or harmed. Number 5, people must be free to abort unwanted children. If a man can have sex and then live without the consequences, then the same should be true for a woman too. A woman must have the right to abort an unwanted child. Every person develops soul bonds, so when a soul bond wears out, a person must be free to divorce. When one starts to grow, one must be free to get together with that person, even if they are married. Number 7, diffuse religious radicalism. Christianity says Jesus is the only way. Diffuse this by silencing Christianity and promoting other faiths, the creation of interfaith harmony. Number 8, use media to influence mass opinion. Create mass opinion that is receptive to these values by using TV, film, the press, etc. Basically use what Western believers call normal, and what the Western believers call normal, the African church would be pornography. Number 9, debase art in all its forms. Corrupt music, painting, poetry, and every expression of the heart and make it obscene, immoral, and occultic. Debase the arts in every way possible. Get the church to endorse every one of these 9 strategies. Get the church to accept these principles and say they're okay, and then legal grounds is given for these values to get a foothold. Need I say more? This is basically our world in 40 seconds. The whole controversy between abortion, gay rights, gay marriage, all of these things are just clashing towards a lot of, all these things are just clashing in this great huge pile of strife and enmity between those that are in the church and those that are in the world, because of extreme Christians, and I'm going to use the word extreme in this sense, who seek that, oh, God hates fags, or God is going completely against homosexuals. And then there's those in the world who hear that, and then they're like, because of the Christian stance on homosexuality, I don't think I would ever want to be a Christian. So that, a little bit of that bashing debases the picture of God himself. But at the same time, as a Christian, it is imperative that we think, or that we have it in the forefront to address that just because someone sins differently than us does not give us the right to judge them. Yes, what they're doing is sin, and sin is sin, and I'm going to stay with that because that is what God's law states. But I'm not going to say that just because you are homosexual, or because you are gay or lesbian, that you're going to go to hell, or that you're going to suffer torment from God. And the same is true for every sin. For by James chapter 2 and verse 16, I believe it is, if you break one commandment, you break them all. So whether or not you're homosexual, or you lie, or you steal, you break one of those commandments, it's as if all of them are broken. So the only way to true righteousness, the only way that someone can be truly saved, is by belief in Jesus Christ, and that is by the transformation of your character. Living your life for Christ and obeying God's law. Listening to that still small voice that entrusts you to do right. Some of these statements, as stated by Alice A. Bailey, many people agree with, sadly. But this information is real. You can find these documents regarding Alice A. Bailey in the Library of Congress, and these documents and articles can be found in Parliament of many other nations as well. Alice A. Bailey was born in 1880, so it's without a doubt she's dead, but that doesn't mean her writings were not incorporated. I won't get into the whole New Age agenda because it's too wide a subject to express in this act, but can only be given in bite-sized pieces. But the trail of breadcrumbs always lead back to one person or one institution, and those are the ways of Lucifer, that fallen angel from heaven who hates God and claims the earth as his. Take heed that no man deceives you. It is through brainwashing that you can create mass opinion and formulate it into the hearts and the minds of people. The TV is just a one-way communication where only what they post can be seen, whereas the internet is a two-way communication stream. You can send information and receive information. Technology is morally neutral until you can apply it. And this concept is just like that of the lives of millions. It is your life. It can be used for great good or for great evil, but it cannot be neutral. No living human can say, I am neutral, for even in the face of history and persecution, the writings and ideas of Elie Wiesel, a Jewish survivor from the Holocaust, and Martin Luther King Jr., all of their writings, they echo. Neutrality is betrayal. It always helps the oppressor, never the oppressed. This statement marks our coming times, signifying that to be idle in this world is to be on Satan's side, but to be active means an absolute choice. Remember, the choice is yours whom you will serve. Spend your time wisely, and if you don't, your life will be over in a flash. It's here today, but it'll be gone, but it might not be here tomorrow. If it's your life, and whether you like it or not, it's ending 1 minute at a time. But do you see just how far back and how deep Satan's statutes run? Everything must be checked to see if it's morally neutral, if it's for God or if it's for Satan, whether it's sinfully suggestive or morally uplifting. The neutral ground doesn't exist in the lives of human beings. There is no gray area. There is no gray area in choice. It's black or white, but this neutrality can only exist in physical or concept things. In abstract objects and concepts like music and art, can neutrality be possible? Pay attention to what I just said. It can be. That doesn't mean all of it is. Music is just as uplifting as it is darkening or depressing. Music is a great motivator for great evil or for a great good. Music and arts are only neutral until you suggest a certain message or a certain idea. The same way how a blank sheet of paper is just a blank sheet of paper until you add color. The New World Order is grouped together by the great merchants of the earth stated in Revelation 18, who work hand in hand with Babylon the harlot, who is none other than the papacy. But the United States in Revelation chapter 13 is the beast with horns like a lamb, which will one day speak as a dragon, and they will glorify the harlot, which is the papacy. The beast before it, and shall worship the image of the beast, which the horse sitteth, and will make allegiance, and seek to persecute all who do not bow to the beast, the papacy, meaning their doctrines, their actions, their political systems and decisions will be reliant and similar to the teaching and doctrines of the papacy. The papacy and the United States will one day join hands together, and even in news reports and in government history, we always see each one of the presidents going to the Holy See to see the Pope, or even going to the Vatican. We have thousands, and most of the ambassadors of each country are going to see the Pope or going to the Holy See in general. Wake up. This is the world we live in, and this is the matter. This is the master plan to rule the world. Look at the scriptures in Revelation chapter 13 and verse 16 through 17. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. In essence, the papacy seeks control, and the United States is going to give the papacy control, in which under their rule, under their one government, they will control the world through their resolves and so-called efforts to benefit the economy and to help institute world peace. Peace and safety they shall cry. That is taken from the text in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, just the first few verses, maybe verses 1 to 6. But by the means of unity and locking in of faiths and incorporating the worship of the Pope into daily life, that all may not buy or sell unless they had the mark of him in their foreheads or in their right hand. And that's just it. If anyone knows the human anatomy, they know that the forehead, or the prefrontal cortex, is where all the control of any person, of any human being, is located. Their thoughts, their actions, their characters, their emotions, their processing is all done in their prefrontal cortex, which is the forehead area of the skull. Putting two and two together, some will worship the beast with their might and willful worship. But then there will be those that will worship because they have to. They see and feel that in order to stay alive or to sustain their families or their jobs, they will have to follow along with the new way. That's what it means to have the mark in your right hand. Because most of the tasks you set out to do, you usually do them with your right hand, unless you're left-handed. But on a serious note, the concept is the same. Many will fall under the worship of the papacy because they feel they have nothing else to give them sustenance. And some of these will be the people even in the church. It's funny because you think the ones in the church would be the most safe. Not entirely true. Judgment is upon everyone and even on God's people, whether or not they will be found faithful in what they'll believe and what they professed. We need to stop playing church and get serious. And I'm just speaking to all those that go to church. Time for superficiality is expired long ago. We are just living in a time that is given by grace. God would have come earlier, but God wants none to perish, but God wants all to come to heaven. See 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 9. So that is why he's holding the door out until time will come when there won't be any more conversations, or there won't be any more conversions or transforming of character. During this will the die be cast. And the promise in Revelation chapter 22 and verse 11 will be imminent. He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. He that is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. Remember, the world is at enmity with God. The world hates God, and so if the world hates God that is in heaven, how much more does he hate his... How much more... If the world hates God, and so if the world hates God that is in heaven, how much more does the world hate his people here on earth? Jesus speaks and says, if the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. In John chapter 15 and verse 18. And that is just what has been advocated through many of the television programming and popular music. The hatred of good, the spite against order, the glorification of pleasure, greed, and trivial things. This is on the personal level, but let's ascend above the clamor of Hollywood and go to the Oval Office, the White House. While everyone's preoccupied with what's on the boob tube, the government has been taking away the rights of citizens and turning the Bill of Rights into a bill for sale. December 31st, 2011. President Obama has signed the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA for short, which is the document that gives our military the power to lock up and detain U.S. citizens in military detention facilities and torture them for indefinite periods of time without a trial. And their reasons for enacting these bills are to supposedly fight war on terror. The document specifies the detention of Al-Qaeda members and associated parties. Associated parties could be anything. If you are someone who makes posts or stance that the government is evil or the government should be abolished, you can be classified as a terrorist because of the Homeland Security's definition of terrorism or their definition of extremism. And the stereotypes of extremists and those that are extremists are considered suspects of terrorism. For a terrorist, by definition, is someone who uses extreme measures to achieve a political goal or aim. Now, with this bill, Christians can be deemed as terrorists as the Strategic Implementation Plan was enacted December 1st, 2011. Listen to this clip from NPR about the subject.
Later today, the White House will unveil a broad new strategy aimed at battling homegrown terrorism here in the United States. Many recent terror plots have come from inside the U.S., from violent extremists who get radical ideas from the internet, and the administration wants to head off those plots. We're going to talk about that this morning with NPR's Dina Temple-Raston, who has details about the plan that others have not yet reported. Dina, good morning.
Good morning.
So why is the White House focused on this aspect of the threat right now?
Well, the things that used to flag law enforcement to possible terrorists, traveling overseas for training or large money transfers, those aren't triggered by these homegrown terrorists. If someone's watching violent jihadi videos on his computer in the basement, it's pretty hard for law enforcement to know about that. I spoke with the administration's chief counterterrorism official, John Brennan, and here's how he described the goal for the new strategy.
What we have to do is to be prepared for the different types of approaches that Al-Qaeda is pursuing, the large attacks, the small attacks, the groups that are operating together, and the individuals that, again, may be vulnerable to these types of entreaties.
Okay, so that's the idea, and you've got details of the plan to counter those threats. What have you got?
Well, basically, they're looking to work at the local level. The White House is really sensitive to the civil liberties issues all this might raise. So part of the plan has the Department of Homeland Security stepping up its community outreach to talk about protecting people's rights in the communities. They're going to be enlisting schools and community leaders in this, and they're going to teach them to identify violent extremists so they can be stopped. What's different here is that the administration has identified these unusual partners to help them. The Department of Education, for example.
Yeah, getting federal law enforcement to work with schools is a little bit unusual.
It's an odd mix, but a lot of the agencies and groups in this plan have never participated in national security issues before. They've worked with law enforcement on drugs and gangs and bullying, but the idea is to make spotting violent extremism just another extension of those familiar programs. The strategy isn't going to be seamless. It's going to require training people to know what to look for, of course.
Which is really a complicated thing here, Dina Temple-Raston. Following your own reporting, you have looked at some of the training that the FBI and other agencies have tried to do in this area. Some of it has ended up going wrong. Some of it has ended up focusing on Muslims in general rather than specific people who might be of interest. So are people confident that they know how to interact with the community, interact with schools, anybody else they might deal with?
Well, this might be the problem. The White House says they have a training review and standards, or they'll put standards in place by the spring to take care of these earlier problems. And the Department of Homeland Security is supposed to start evaluating experts, which they didn't do before, to weed out this anti-Muslim bias. If there's a weak link in this new strategy, the training component is probably it. Teaching people to identify extremist behaviors, as you say, could be hard, and there could be lots of room for error there.
Oh, gosh. And I'm even thinking about the advertisements, signs that you see in airports and train stations that say if you see something, say something. But, of course, what is this something? What are we supposed to be looking for exactly?
Well, I spoke with this key person on the White House National Security staff who's working on this. His name is Quentin Wiktorowicz, and here's how he explained it.
So, for example, it could be a combination between viewing that kind of violent extremist material online at the same time as making statements that indicate a rejection of American society, hatred toward other groups. But again, none of those would be in isolation from one another. It would be the combination of factors.
So the key distinction here is that they're going to be trying to track behavior, not ethnic or religious identity. And the new strategy they're supposed to unveil this afternoon would enlist whole communities to help them, not just law enforcement.
And looking for a combination of things. Just going on to a particular website doesn't necessarily mean anything. Just dressing a particular way or having a particular religion doesn't mean anything in particular.
Exactly.
Dina, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
NPR's Dina Temple-Raston has some details this morning about this new White House counterterrorism strategy.
So from what I just heard, they want to enforce our youth to learn how to identify possible violent extremists. They want youth to spy out, to seek out possible terrorists. Are you serious? If that's not even one shade of paranoia, I don't know what is. I won't go into all the politics of my views against the United States or for having gone to war and intruding in the homes of thousands, but anyone can see that there's something wrong with this picture. Now about extremism, the definition of an extremist by the Department of Homeland Security's Domestic Extremist Lexicon defines a suspected terrorist as someone who is but is not limited to the behavior of anti-technology, owns a 7-day supply of food in their house, and uses alternative media sources. For example, videos of our world in the light of the Bible, or watching news about the actions that transpire in another country, i.e. the viewing of the Gaza Strip bombing or jihadist videos. Ladies and gentlemen, our government is nothing short of paranoid, and their defense is by reason of the tension in the Middle East. Their classifications of extremism are too simple, because if being anti-technology makes you an extremist, then I guess we're going to have to lock up all the Amish people and rule America because of their belief in no electricity. And if my belief in alternate media sources makes me an extremist, then I guess we're all extremists, assuming the average teenager doesn't really care about politics or even watching the news. Our news comes from another source, social networking, Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, YouTube, etc. But all these arguments and definitions of extremism target God's people. Look at the link in the description. The document is available to be seen. One short story. A friend of mine filled a job application a while ago. He claimed that he couldn't work on Saturdays because of his beliefs in keeping the Sabbath day, the seventh day, which is Saturday. And for that, he was denounced as extreme. In the naked eye, not even regarding Bible prophecy, this is all paranoia on the side of the United States government. But as we study the scriptures, we begin to see how much the United States is beginning to speak as a dragon. And if anyone remembers, the dragon, speaking as a dragon, means speaking like Lucifer, speaking like Satan. The rights and amendments are stripped away one by one. May I call to your attention the Occupy movement on Wall Street. Journalists were arrested. For what? Doing their job? Has America lost their God-given mind? Not yet, but it's quickly approaching. Tear gas was thrown down to disperse demonstrators. Many were arrested and jailed. Some were beaten by police and other officials. What freedom of speech? What a right to a fair trial. Arrest by law should not be made without a warrant under the court of law. Anyone who looks behind the scenes, anyone who is sober and aware of many things in our society that traverse the boundaries of spiritual and political, can see that the grand climax is coming to earth. And as a Seventh-day Adventist, I believe that is the coming of Christ. But before he comes, he tells us perilous times such as never was will be upon us. And that is what's fermenting in our world with the New Age movement of interlocking faiths and watering down the gospel. Satan has the world believe in unity is the only way, not Jesus. But by abasing Christ and suffering the belief that all is relative, let our faiths unite as one. Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, we all coexist. All paths lead to heaven. Don't listen to Satan's lies. Don't listen to his suggestions. Jesus exclaims, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father but by me. And Satan has equipped all under his control with the immediate thought response, but what about the other faiths? Are you telling me that they worship in vain? Not I, but Christ. For it is written in Matthew chapter 15 and verse 9, but in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. Regarding the NDAA, President Obama declared under his administration that this bill is for those outside the U.S. to further protect our rights as United States citizens, and that no American will be locked up without due processing. But we all know how valid a politician's pinky promise is. For around January 20th, President Obama passed the Enemy Expatriation Act. This bill gives our federal government the power to strip United States citizens of their citizenship. So President Obama did keep his promise. He wouldn't be torturing a U.S. citizen. He would be taming an enemy combatant. And since most of U.S. citizens are born in America, if their citizenship is removed and the military takes custody of them, there will be no one to release them to. And this raises the question, why didn't we hear about this? Why didn't the public go into a frenzy about these bills? Because if anyone remembers prior to that time, around January 2012, that was the time in which the whole controversy between the SOPA and the people bills were in danger of being passed. These bills threatened the First Amendment and seemed to usher communism by banning all social networks and stopping piracy, by the exercise of government control of the internet. Fortunately, it wasn't passed, but it was used to arouse the attention of all as a decoy, a distraction, or a diversion. While the Enemy Expatriation Act, the NDA, and the Strategic Implementation Plan were being passed to take our rights. What we see here is a degradation of the Bill of Rights and the succession of the New World Order. So while millions are so stuck in the system, so hopelessly dependent on their entertainment, their jobs, so hopelessly dependent on the abundance of Babylon's delicacies that they will fight to protect it, many are not willing to be unplugged because they may hate the idea that they are living a lie. But you must wake up before the world collapses before your eyes. For at the end of the trials and the tribulations to come, Jesus will stand and ask, "What did you do with the time I gave you?" What excuse will you have? Can you say, "Lord, I didn't know, neither was I forewarned"? Don't delay to seek the truth, which is Jesus Christ and his righteousness. Not because of any propaganda to get you to join the church on my behalf, but because of your soul salvation. Seek God for your soul salvation. I am concerned, and how much more is Christ concerned? Because he laid down his life that you may have eternal life. But you must understand, the chips are getting ready to go down, and with the chess pieces in place, that which was perceived as prophecy afar off is very so much near. Get ready and stay up and stay ready. Unplug yourself from the matrix, for what comes next are the absolute results.